Okay, today we're going to go over carburetors a little bit, specifically slide type carburetors. They're a beautiful thing, aren't they? Very mechanical. Oldest fuel system for internal combustion engines in various forms. They've come a long way, but they are some neat things. This particular carburetor is a Key and PWK 34 millimeter flat slide. Look at that. Beautiful, ain't it? Anyway, what you're going to have is 6 tuning circuits, basically. Well, 5. And then if you got a power jet, actually have 5 tuning circuits. If you got a power jet, that's 6. And an accelerator pump makes a 7th. And we'll go over that here in a minute. It would be too lean. So just say it was entirely too rich at 55. Then I would drop it down to a 50 and go through it again. Air screw, back at 1.5 turns, and then try it again. Do I have to have the air fuel screw end seated, almost seated, meaning it's richer? Or do I have to turn it all the way out so it's leaner? And so on and so on until you get it in that pretty much one turn out to 3 turns out range. And that range should be good. And whenever you're jetting, you need to ride the bike. Just don't sit there and rev it up, because you can't really tell by that. You actually need to take it out and ride it to see if you got any spits or sputters or anything. And a lot of times what will happen is you'll get a little teeny sputter somewhere, or a little lean pop spit back through the carburetor. So you could turn the air fuel screw, probably an 1/8 or a 1/4 turn at a time. Take it out and ride it, check it again. And this is all going to be dependent on the weather too. So you don't want to be jetting something when it's 30 degrees outside. As far as overall jetting, main jet, needle position, needle taper, slow speed jet, all of that, because it's going to be different when it's 90 degrees outside or 95 degrees, or like it's been here almost 100 degrees. It's going to be entirely too rich. If you jet it for cold weather, it's a lot richer, and the hotter it gets, the richer it's going to be. So weather plays an important factor there. So we did that. Now the needle is a different story. Actually, I'm not going to take this one out. I'll just show you on this one. Same way with your jetting for the clip here. Actually, I'll do that later. You're jetting for the clip. Typically going to start off at number 3, pretty much, which is going to be third clip down on most carburetors. So you start off at the 3rd clip down, 2nd or 3rd, depending on. I start off on the 3rd and then ride the bike and see what it's going to do. And for instance, let's say you got a little lean spot from probably 1/4 to 1/2 throttle. That's in the taper. That's not the needle itself, or that's not the needle position, up or down. That's the taper right here. So let's say you got a little lean pop right there at, just say, 1/4 throttle. You can take this needle and swap it out for a next needle, which is going to be, the taper is going to be thinner. There's like 3 or 4 different needles available for most of these carburetors, Mikuni or Keihin. And the only difference is the diameter of the needle up here is the same, but if you see where this taper goes right here, the taper is going to be different. So thinner down here equals richer. Fatter down here equals leaner. Now, I've known guys that have a small lathe and they'll actually take needles that they can't actually get anymore. They can't get, whatever needles available isn't suitable for them. So we'll go in and measure it in a couple of different spots, and then we'll take a piece of sandpaper and kind of change the taper on the needle. And drop it in the bike and take it out and ride it and see if it got rid of that spot you had there. I used to know a guy that made needles, worked for Dynajet. He was the guy that did the development work on the jet kits. And he's the one that taught me about needles, because before that, I really didn't know nothing about them, about how they affect what range and all that. And guy made needles. That's all he did all day long. He'd make a needle, do a dyno run, test it, ride the bike, whatever. And until he found the right one, came up with what they needed for the majority of airbox mods or pipe mods, whatever, to run that needle with whatever setup. And it's a compromise, when you're doing that, because you might not have it perfect for your setup. That's why guys would take a needle and shape it themselves. Okay, that's the needle. And then your clip position is going to affect pretty much half to three-quarter throttle. Half to three-quarter. So what a lot of guys will do is they'll just throw it. They'll get because it's easier than trying to find another needle. They'll just throw a shim up under here to raise the needle up slightly, which richens it. Unfortunately, it richens it across the board from quarter to three-quarter. So, for instance, you might have had the jetting perfect from, say, half to three-quarter with the needle you got in there. And all you needed to do was change the taper on it a little bit. So what you've done by raising the needle, you've richened it across the board from quarter to three-quarter, when all you needed was that quarter to half. Okay, that's that. Now, all this stuff will overlap somewhat, slightly. Like, for instance, a lot of guys will have a little miss just off, eighth to a quarter throttle, which is usually slide cutaway. And I don't have the slide out of here. So let me pull the slide out and I'll show it to you what I mean. Spring, and you're going to have a little cup on the end of the spring. So let me take this out of here and I'll show you what you don't want. So what happens sometimes, people put shims in there, and or depending on the carburetor. If I can get this back in here, I'll show you here. So it always helps to check this. You want your needle solid. You don't want to be able to move the needle up and down like that. That induces wear in the needle. When the slide's raised, and this cup should fit down over top of the needle perfectly, like so. It should be up against the top of the needle, just like that. There's a little cup that sits in there to hold the needle down, because you don't want the needle doing this, walking around in there. Because what will happen, and I've said this before, at certain range, we'll just say the needle's up out of the slide's up, and if the needle's loose, if it's loose like this, it's walking around inside the needle jet, and the telltale sign is you'll pull one apart and you see where the needle's worn pretty damn good right in this area here where it's been floating around inside the needle jet. So you want this the needle good and tight down in there, like so. I mean, it's never going to be perfectly tight, but you want it as you don't want it like this. You want it with spring pressure on it. So you're not getting, because you've seen before where guys put too many shims under, or the cap doesn't fit down over top of the needle good. So what you end up with is the needle's actually moving up and down like that. And that's changing your jetting if it's moving around. Okay, that's that. Now back to the slide cutaway. Like this slide doesn't have a cutaway on it. So it's kind of really hard to show if it's, since it doesn't have a cutaway. It's going to be on the front end of the slide here, like right in this area here. It's not so noticeable on a flat slide. It's got very, very little cutaway there. I mean, very little compared to a round slide where you have a pretty good angle on the front of the slide there. Let me see if I can show you that on this other carburetor. This isn't a flat slide, but same idea. This is the Bing CV. This actually has no cutaway on the front of it either. Now that cutaway is going to affect the throttle range in about the eighth to a quarter range there. And I'll put a chart up in the description there so you can see it about what does what. Now the other thing is main jet size. That's 3/4 to it's full throttle pretty much, 3/4 to full. And your main jet is going to affect, anything over 3/4 wide open throttle. So what you're going to do there is you're going to have to ride it and see what it does as far as how it pulls. It should be crisp, not fluttery. Typically, the best place to do it actually for main jet is on dyno, or at the drag strips, even better. Actually, drag strips or road testing is the perfect place to jet your carburetor. Because what happens, just if you just take it someplace that has a dyno, they're going to dyno tune it, and they may or may not get it close. What I mean by that is if they're jetting they're doing mainly hard pull. So it's not even a good tuning tool, really. It helps because you don't have to depend on somebody to go out and ride the bike that actually knows how to ride the bike to jet it. So for a full pull, but drag strip, especially a 1/4 mile drag strip, this is a perfect place for doing jetting mains. It's definitely cheaper than getting a dyno run, and it's a hell of a lot funner. So let's talk a little bit about that for a minute. Let's say you go to the drag strip and your bike runs, hypothetically, we'll say 11 seconds and a quarter, or 12, or we're just going to say 11. So stick with the 11 seconds and a quarter. Now, your mile an hour is pretty much going to be close to the same every run. Your time might be different. You might go out and run an 11:30. And let's just say you did an 11:30 at 120 miles an hour. Well, that's good. And then the next run up, you run a 11 second, and it was also 120 miles an hour. So the difference was in you. You missed a shift point. Your rear tire was slipping. You were really slow on the light. 60-foot time was horrible. you're shifting at the wrong RPM, whatever, any of those things affects time. Doesn't really affect mile an hour very much. So you make your run, you come back in and pull the plug on your bike and look at the plugs and see what color they are. You know, is it lily white? Is it a little sooty? Or is it a nice tan color? Well, all that matters. Depending on what color, you know, if it's lily white, it's lean. So you're going to have to go with the bigger main jet. So let's just say you did your 120 miles an hour in the quarter, and you've done 3 or 4 runs, and that's to get a baseline. That's where you are. So say the plugs were lily white, and it had, we're just going to say a 150 main jet in there. So you know they're white, so you grabbed 160 and you threw a 160 in there. And then you went back out, and let's say you went 122 miles an hour in the quarter. Your time was about the same, but your mile an hour was, we'll just say 122 miles an hour, 123, right in that range. So you know that going up in that main jet size, you automatically made more horsepower because it needed more fuel. So you go out and you come back and you make another run, and it's the same thing, 122 miles an hour. But just for giggles, you grab a 165 main and throw in there and try that. You go back out and make another run with a 165 main, and we'll just say it does 124 miles an hour. Well, you're picking up horsepower there, so you're getting close on the jetting. So you do a couple more runs like that, and your mile an hour stays about the same. So you decide, I'm going to try a 170. So you do a 170, and your mile an hour goes back down to, say, 123 or 122. It just say it goes down. So you know 170 is too big. So if you have one, I would probably try a 167.5 because you can get half sizes in jets. And then as far as the last circuit on this carburetor is the power jet, which is right here, which is just fed directly off the bowl there through this tube. And on this particular carburetor, it's not adjustable. At least I don't think it is. Most of them have a jet you can change on so it's not adjustable on this carburetor. And I don't have my damn glasses on, so this, in fact, is not the air fuel screw. That's the damn idle screw that holds the slide up to change the idle. Air fuel screw on this carb is right here. So put your damn glasses on, man. Anyway, your power jet feeds right up directly out of the bowl through this tube right here, up to right here. And on this carburetor, it's not adjustable. And all it's doing, really, so I don't think it is. And all it's doing is pulling fuel directly out of the bowl up through this nozzle right here and into the carb right here. And it's that's wide open throttle. So what you'll find over the power jet, you typically can run a slightly smaller main jet than you normally would. So it actually moves you can make the main jet a little more crisp running the smaller main jet with power jet on there. On some carburetors, it makes all the difference in the world. I mean, it definitely helps out. But say you had a non-slide type carburetor like a Kean, not a butterfly carb, or better yet, an S&S carb is a perfect example. You know, both those carbs could really need a power jet on there, especially the S&S, because it's only got two tuning circuits on there, a main jet and a pilot jet or slow speed jet, and that's it. And depending on the setup on an S&S, you could have a horrible setup if you're running really long duration cams and drag pipes that are especially drag pipes that are too big. You're asking for trouble there. It's going to have all kinds of problems because you can never get the jetting perfect on that thing. Sometimes you throw a power jet on there, you can get it pretty damn close to perfect on an S&S or on a butterfly, any butterfly type of carb. In other words, the more tuning circuits you got, the better. It just helps. So let's talk about overlap a little bit, because everything on all these circuits overlap. So just say you're on the full throttle. Well, you're still pulling fuel through the needle. You're still pulling fuel through the slow speed jet and the pilot jet. But that's not what I'm talking about, overlap. Yes, they are still pulling through there. What I'm talking about overlap is the pilot jet and, say, the taper of the needle. They're kind of overlap circuits slightly there. That's why a lot of guys will not do the needle because they don't have the needle or they don't know how to tune the needle or whatever. So they'll put a bigger pilot jet in there, which is going to mask the lean spot of wherever the needle was, or even the air fuel screw. It's going to transition slightly over that slide cutaway too, which is from just say 1/8 to 1/4 throttle. Well, that can be masked with overlap by the taper of the needle or the pilot jet. Both of those, they make an effect. What we want is crisp carburation from closed throttle all the way to the top. The other tuning circuit, this carburetor doesn't have one, but is accelerator pump, which, truth is, when I'm tuning the carburetor, I always turn the accelerator pump off. The accelerator pumps get overused quite a bit on carburetors. They are nice to have as a quick blip of the throttle there. Hold on, let me grab one that's got an accelerator pump on there. I got one over here. Okay, I got this HSR 42 here, which accelerator pump nozzle is right here. And Mikuni's nice enough to make the accelerator pump pretty damn adjustable. They got different size nozzles you can put in here. And also, too, you can set how much it's spraying. This little piston right here goes to a diaphragm down in the bowl down here. And you can set this to where, you know, RPM-wise, you know, you want just a little shot right there. Well, Mikuni's nice enough to put 2 adjusters on there, or 2 screws, so you can set how much you want as far where the stroke begins to work versus how far you want it to work. So you're going to adjust 1 screw, and let's say you only wanted that much of a stroke right there. Well, if you look, you can see how far the slide's open right there. So you see this, you feel the resistance. It's actually loose right there. So if you bring that down to where it's just touching the pump, and that's how much it's got. So you would adjust the stroke length with these screws here. One of them's going to bring this down closer to actually being on the pump. So you adjust one, but let's say you only wanted the length travel to be that far. So you adjust the other one. And two, when it squirts, when you're setting these on any carb with an accelerator pump, you want to watch it. You want the nozzle, the spray, to be right in the center of the needle. It helps to atomize the fuel coming out of the pump a little bit. Some of them, the nozzle's shooting right down the side here, and it's just shooting raw gas down the intake manifold. It helps when it squirts, if you actually, it hits the needle and kind of separates a little bit, atomizes it slightly, or breaks up the fuel stream a little bit better. It does help. And really, that's about all I got for carburetors. They really are beautiful. Look at the size of that Mikuni there. This is a 42 for the Sportster over there. Great carburetor. I started using these when they first came out. Actually, before these came out, they had the HS40, which was also a good carburetor. The problem with HS40 is the throttle pull on it was horrible. I mean, really heavy-duty springs on the throttle there. And they did work good, and they were extremely tunable, just like the 42. But the throttle pull was so damn hard. You'd put one on a guy's bike, and they'd complain about it. Guys that actually rode their bikes more than 20 miles at a time. That throttle pull was horrendous. And no matter how you lube the cables or whatever, they were just horrible. But what was happening, why I've switched to these things, is I used to install a lot of S&S carbs. But on certain bikes, with usually with drag pipes and certain cams, especially long duration cams, intake track's too short, and you're getting no scavenging from the pipes. So you'd get a dead spot in an S&S that no matter what, you couldn't get out. And you'd tell guys, man, get rid of them damn drag pipes. They didn't want to do that. Everybody loves their drag pipes, or did. And I guess they still do, somewhat. But eventually got them doing Thunder headers and Mikunis. Made all the difference in the world. Big difference. Or Vance & Hines Pro Pipe later on, sold a lot of those. Great carburetors there too. And that's about all I got. I'm actually going to show you this chart here. I'm going to go over it really quick here, and I'll throw a copy of these charts in the description down there when I actually load this video up. So this is a copy of an older old chart I had that kind of goes over the jetting there. This just explains, 0 to eighth, eighth to a quarter, quarter to half, quarter to 3/4, 3/4 to full. And this one doesn't have the picture of the, this one does. I'll put both of these in the description down there so you can take a gander at them. And this one's a little bit more stylized there about what affects what on there. It was kind of old and faded from the stuff I had. I just blew it up. And then I'll include this one too. This one's a hell of a lot more readable. So it actually explains what does what in the video there. So, like I said, the carburetors are neat. They're not fuel injection, but you know what? I like fuel injection too. I really do. You can do a lot of stuff with fuel injection you can't do with the carburetor. Think of it like this. You're depending on the size of this throat here, your bore size, venturi size of your carburetor is what's going to determine how much power you got and how your fuel is being pulled through there. You know, you got too big of a carburetor and it's lazy because you don't have a good signal through the carburetor to actually draw fuel through it. Small carburetor, you don't have enough air flowing through it with to support whatever RPM you're on. So it's a compromise at best. You know, fuel injection, on the other hand, you could run a fairly massive throttle body on there, and you're not really worried about signal because that's what the fuel pump and the injectors are for. You know, they're depending on the injectors and the fuel pump to atomize the fuel. So you're not as concerned about intake signal, meaning you can pull a lot more air through a bigger throttle body than you can through a carburetor. Perfect example, the first time they did, Harley did fuel injection, those intake runners were teeny. I mean, they were absolutely teeny on the Magneti Marelli system and even on the twin cam. You know, the first year twin cam, they used those Magneti Marellis. I had a guy that had a Screaming Eagle twin cam, road glide, tour glide, whatever you want to call it. And Screaming Eagle road glide, 99 model. I think it was blue on blue, something like that. Or blue and silver maybe. But had extremely teeny little intake runners on that Magneti Marelli, which aren't conducive to making power. So he had a somebody do CNC heads on there, different cams, CNC heads, pipe, all kinds of crap, and it like only made like 88, 89 horsepower, something like that. And we took and got a, guy brought it in, he's like, man, can you do anything to get me more power out of this thing? I was like, yeah, what do you got in there? So he's explained to me, he's got the heads, got these such and such cams. And yeah, as soon as I seen it had the little teeny throttle bodies on there, I was like, that thing ain't never going to make more than 90 horsepower with them damn Magneti Marelli system on there. So what we did is got a horsepower Inc. elliptical system, elliptical throttle body to replace that Magneti Marelli system. I hooked it up and it went from 89 horsepower to right at about 110 at the rear wheel. Just with changing the throttle body to a bigger one. So basically 21 horsepower more, but across the board. You know, yeah, it made 21 overall, but it also made a hell of a lot more down low and in the mid-range, made more power everywhere. And then guy wasn't actually happy with that. I mean, he was happy about it because it did run a hell of a lot better. But what I ended up doing was changing the cam timing. I think I used a crane, plus or minus 4 degree crank sprocket to advance the cam timing on it, to bring the power down lower, bring the torque curve down a little bit lower in the power range. He was really happy with that. But that's about it for carburetors. I'll put all this stuff in there, and I think for these things for the Beamer, I'm waiting on some jets, still waiting on throttle cables, and a couple other things. We're ready to go on that thing. Start trying to get it dialed in whenever it quits raining here. Backyard looks like it's got 4 inches of water over it. Stuff's floating away. But that's all I got. And like I said, I'll put these charts in there so you can take a gander at them. They are nice to have. That one's, I don't remember where I got that from. It's pretty old. And this one was too. That was actually out of a Makuni book, I think, from a long time ago. But good explanation stuff. Anyway, you guys take care. Have a great weekend. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Just thanks all the way around. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Guys, take care. Have a great day.